Chapter 14, Mr. Blacky's Strange Army. Pixie saw the children peeping in. He got up from the sofa and called out to them, "Hello, I'm so glad you've come. Come along in. I've got an old friend here and I want you to meet him." The old friend stood up, and what do you think he was? Well, he was a tall gollywog, so old that his black hair had turned gray. He was not as tall as they were, but a bit taller than Pixie. "This is Mr. Blacky, the ruler of Gollywog Village," said Pixie. The Gollywog bowed politely and shook hands. Everyone sat down, the children and Pixie on the sofa, and the Gollywog in the wishing chair. "I hope you don't mind my sitting in your wishing chair," he said politely to the children, "but it really is such a treat and a privilege. I've never even seen one before." "Oh, not at all. We're very pleased," said Peter. "I only wish it would grow its wings, and then it could take you for a little ride. It feels funny at first, but it's lovely when you get used to it." "I've been telling Mr. Blacky about your toys that Mr. Grimm has and won't give back," said Pixie. "I think Mr. Grimm should give them up to you," said Mr. Blacky earnestly. Sneeze. "I propose that I raise a little army from Toyland and march on the school." Peter and Molly gazed at him in wonder and astonishment. It all sounded like a dream to them, but a very exciting and interesting dream. An army from Toyland? Goodness gracious, whoever had heard of such a thing? "Mr. Blacky has a very great influence in Toyland," explained Pixie. "As I told you, he is the head of Gollywog Village and has very much respected and admired. And in fact, he's now ruled in it for over 100 years. "Are you really 100 years old?" asked Molly, amazed. 153 to be exact," said Mr. Blacky with a little bow. "I became head when I was 54. "Is it difficult to be the head of Gollywog Village?" asked Peter. "Well, no, not really, so long as you're very firm with the young Gollywogs," said Mr. Blacky. "They're rather wild, you know. Now, what I suggest is this. I will send to the wooden soldiers and the clockwork animals and the sailor dolls, and also to my Gollywogs, of course, and I will tell them to meet me at a certain place. They will make a fine army." "And you'll march on the school, I suppose?" said Pixie. "And when you have defeated Mr. Grimm, you're going to rescue Rosebud the doll and all the other toys?" "Exactly," said Mr. Blacky. "Can we come too?" said Peter. "I'd simply love to see all of this." "Ah, if only the wishing chair would grow its wings when your army's on the march, well, then we could hover above the battle and watch," said Molly. "But it never does grow its wings exactly when we want it to." "I will send you word when we mean to march," said the Gollywog. "It'll probably be tomorrow evening. Well, I must go now. Thank you for a very pleasant evening, Mr. Pixie." He shook hands with all three of them and went out the door. "Well, isn't he nice?" said Pixie. "He's a very old friend of my great-aunt Quickfingers, you know, and I've met him often at her house. I thought I'd tell him about Rosebud and the other toys and how Mr. Grimm wouldn't give them back. I guessed that he would be able to help." The playroom clock struck 10. "We must be getting back," said Molly with a sigh. "We only meant to come for half an hour. It's been lovely, Pixie. I do think that we're awfully lucky having you as a friend and meeting all of your friends and having such an interesting time." They went back to bed, hoping that the wishing chair would grow its wings the next night if the Gollywog gathered together his curious little army. They couldn't go down to the playroom until after tea because Mother took them to see their granny. They raced down as soon as they could, and they were met by a very excited Pixie. "I am so glad that you've come. The wishing chair has grown little buds of wings already. They're going to sprout properly in a minute, and the Gollywog has sent to say that his army is on the march." "Oh, what a bit of luck!" cried the children, and they ran to the chair. Just as they got to it, the knob-like buds on its legs burst open, and out spread the lovely green and yellow wings again. They began to flap at once, and they made quite a wind. "Come on," said Peter, sitting in the chair. "Let's go, and Pixie, don't let's forget to take Winks away from that horrid school if we can. He can live with you here in the playroom, if he hasn't a home to go to." Molly got in, and Pixie sat on the back of the chair. Out the door they flew at top speed. The wishing chair was told to go to Mr. Grimm's. "But don't go down into the grounds," commanded Pixie. "Just hover about somewhere so we can see what's going on and we can dart down if we need to." It wasn't really very long before the chair was hovering over the front gate of Mr. Grimm's school. Not far off were all of the brownies, marching up and down in the big schoolyard doing drills with Mr. Grimm. And then the marching brownies suddenly caught sight of the wishing chair hovering in the air, and they all set up a great shout. "Look, they've come back! Hurrah for Pixie and Peter and Molly!" Mr. Grimm stared up too. He looked rather furious, and to the children's dismay, he bent down and picked up a big stone. It came whizzing through the air at them, but the wishing chair did a little jump to one side, and the stone passed harmlessly by. Then Pixie gave the others a nudge. "Here comes the army, look!" The children looked. Dear me, up the lane marched the strangest little army the children had ever imagined. First came the gray-haired Gollywog, swinging a little sword. Then came a row of wooden soldiers, beating drums. Then another row, blowing on trumpets, and after them came a whole collection of clockwork animals. "There's a jumping kangaroo," cried Pixie in glee, "and a dancing bear." "I see a running dog and a walking elephant," said Molly in delight. "And look, it's a pig that turns head over heels and a duck that waddles," shouted Peter, almost falling out of the chair in his excitement. "And behind them are all the sailor dolls. Don't they look smart?" The strange army came to the gate. The clockwork kangaroo jumped right over it to the other side. He undid the gate and opened it for the army to walk through. The brownies saw the toys before Mr. Grimm did and shouted in joy. They ran to meet them. "Who are you? Where have you come from?" they called. "Can we play with you? We never have any toys here." "We've come for Mr. Grimm. We don't like Mr. Grimm. We've come to capture him. We've come for Mr. Grimm," chanted all of the toys. Mr. Grimm stared at them as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "After him!" shouted the Gollywog, and after him they went. He turned to run, but the jumping kangaroo got between his legs and tripped him up, and there he was, bumping his nose on the ground, yelling for mercy. The toys swarmed all over Mr. Grimm in delight. "Don't pull my hair, don't cut off my beautiful beard," begged Mr. Grimm. The Gollywog seemed just about to cut the long beard off with his sword. The children and Pixie saw it all from their seat up in the wishing chair, and they were just as excited as the toys and the brownies. "I will leave you your beard on one condition," said the Gollywog solemnly. "Go and get the toys you have imprisoned here and bring them out to us." Mr. Grimm got up and went indoors and came out with all of the toys. Molly gave a scream of delight when she saw Rosebud. "Why, he even brought the teapot that grew wings, too," said Peter, quite pleased. The chair flew down to Mr. Grimm, and the children took all of their toys from him. Molly cuddled Rosebud happily. "Thank you," she said to the gray-haired Gollywog. "You and your army have done very, very well. Do please bring any of them to see us whenever you can." The brownies crowded around the chair. "Take us back with you! Take us back!" "Well, we only have room for one of you, and that's Winks," said Pixie firmly. "Come on, Winks." Up went Winks, grinning all over his little brownie face. The wishing chair rose up into the air. "Goodbye! Goodbye!" shouted Pixie and the others. "Let us know if Mr. Grimm behaves too badly, and we'll send the army again. Goodbye!" Off they went with all of the toys and the brownies, waving madly, but Mr. Grimm did not wave. He looked rather down in the mouth indeed, but no one felt particularly sorry for him, not even Molly. And when we read again, next time it will be Chapter 15, Off to the Land of Goodies.